in just about 1 hour. A few hours of that. And
welcome everybody. We're just giving people a few minutes to come on in and we'll get started.
oh, hi.
Hey, Brendan, you don't need to be here to rub it in, you know.
Well, the one way that I have never gotten a deer is tracking one. So.
What, that nice buck you didn't get tracking the other day?
No, that was I set up in an area with plenty of tracks, but I'd been sitting there for an hour.
Oh, okay.
I knew it was a great place, but I was sitting still, and I've always had better luck letting them come to me. I don't think I'm patient enough when it comes to tracking. So.
I wasn't sure if you'd be busy like cutting into an elk steak or something like that right now.
I ate earlier. I did have venison yesterday, but not today.
Excellent, excellent.
Hey, Brendan, congrats on your elk, right?
Yeah, it's I'm almost like a little bit worried about how much luck I've had this year, and I'm going to be paying for it for years to go. So it's an elk hunt, an antelope
Did you
hunt.
kill anything with my tracks yet?
What's that?
Did you kill anything with my tracks yet?
Last year, not this year.
Yeah.
Awesome. And Rich, I haven't seen you in person. Congratulations on your buck. That was awesome to see.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, he's currently at the taxidermist.
Oh, awesome.
You've been following him for a couple of years, or haven't you?
A few years. I actually had him at I pulled back on him last year, and he just got the best of me. So.
Well, you get the last laugh.
Oh yeah, exactly. Turned him into a ragu.
All right, we'll give it one more minute.
Yeah, I'll throw on my headphones.
All right, I think we're pretty good to go. We're live on Facebook. So let me just double check that nobody's in the waiting room. I think we're good. Well, welcome everybody. My name is Chris. I'm one of the board members of the New England chapter of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. It's awesome to see so many people tonight. I know that there's a lot going on, and people's attention is distracted, pulled in a lot of different directions, but what better way to kind of come together than talk about some deer hunting. For those of you who haven't attended one of these events, I just want to give you guys a little bit of an overview of how the evening is going to work. We are going to have a conversation with Jeff and Matt and kind of talk about some different things. And then after which time we're going to have a little Q&A. So at any point during the conversation, you have a question, the best thing to do is to simply write that question in the chat box function. And we're going to collate the questions as the conversation goes. And then we'll pose those questions to our guests, Jeff and Matt. So that's sort of how it's going to go. And again, we definitely hope that you type in some questions on the question box and go from there. Before I introduce Matt and Jeff, I just want to talk a little bit about backcountry hunters and anglers, because I know a lot of people have come in to this conversation tonight through some different channels. Backcountry Hunters and Anglers is a national organization. We try to be the sportsman's voice for public lands, waters, and wildlife. And our focus is on public land, but we venture in a lot of other things here regionally and nationally, like growing the hunting community, mentorship, policy, and the like. Our New England chapter has state leadership teams which represent all of New England's states, and so we're able to kind of focus kind of our boots on the ground type activities at a state-by-state basis. But we take regional initiatives as well and put on programming like this. We have a mentorship program that we're proud of, and we're always trying to kind of connect people both here locally and nationally with some of the hunting traditions that we have, like tracking, that really have strong roots here in New England. So if you want to learn more, please visit our website, backcountryhunters.org, and we really would love your membership, your support, and your engagement in future events like this. Hopefully we'll be able to meet in person and do a few more things in person in the future. And we're always monitoring the current situation with COVID and adjusting, and we'll roll out our in-person events as we are able to. So again, thank you for joining us. And again, I want to welcome Jeff and Matt. These two guys are among some of the more notable trackers here in New England. Both are excellent communicators. They do it through different mediums. Matt, who I should also mention is one of our co-chairs of the New England chapter of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, has articles appearing in a number of different publications, and he has his own book, which I strongly encourage you to check out. Jeff is active in the digital platform. He's got some just phenomenal YouTube content that's unique and just really, really fun to watch. And we were talking before the call. It's just some cool little tidbits that happen when he's out scouting or on a track. So I want to welcome you guys. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for the invite, Chris.
Oh yeah.
And hi everyone.
We appreciate it. So I guess we'll start off with a general question that we kind of always ask our guests. And that's basically just if you could talk a little bit about how you were introduced to hunting and how your sort of hunting experience eventually led you to tracking. And either Matt or Jeff, whoever wants to start, please go right ahead.
I imagine, like a lot of folks, I was introduced to hunting via my father, and growing up in central New York originally, we were right near the northern southern tier line. And so northern zone, there's a lot of open land. You have the Adirondack State Park, and southern tier, you have a lot more private land, but also a lot more deer. And so we had the opportunity to hunt both. And we found ourselves, the older I got, once I had an opportunity to have experience harvesting a few deer, starting out with a button buck and some does, and then eventually a few small bucks, I found myself headed up north to the northern tier, just, more and more. And we would say, a good day in the woods where you don't see another person's track. So you just have it all to yourself. And I'd say, in addition to, my father, I think that there's also some trackers like Joe Donito, Jim Massett. I can remember as a little kid going to seminar from Jim Massett, going to seminars with Hal Blood. And of course, like a lot of folks, having read the books from the Benoits too. So I think there's just a learning and I guess an introduction that goes beyond just the family introduction for me.
Yeah, my background was similar. Started going to family hunting camp at age 5, followed my father around and my uncles. We used to hunt on snow in northern Vermont and track deer when we could, but little drives and pushes. Sometime in college, my uncle took me to northern New Hampshire where the things were a little bigger, and that really got me started. You know, having a lunch on the tailgate in timber company land was just a joy for me. And from there, like Jeff said, watching Benoit videos, going to Hal Blood seminars, all that stuff just really fueled the tracking mystique in my mind, and it became a passion for me.
So, I mean, obviously you guys have had some just tremendous success over the years, but I mean, and there's the obvious product of that experience have been these great deer. But you know, if you can talk a little bit more about what the allure of this style of hunting is for you. I mean, it's not easy. We were talking about quick little, before the call, just quick little hunts after work and things like that. You're talking about a full day commitment in most of your cases. So can you talk just a little bit more about the allure and the thing that keeps you coming back to this style of hunting?
I don't know about Matt, but you know, and when I go out, I tend to cover a lot of ground, and part I don't know about is how sore he is afterwards. But I did 13 miles on Sunday, and I like, even if I don't get one, you know, I like by the time I get home, your legs are stiffened up a little bit, and you feel like you've really experienced the woods, and you've just had this big kind of vast openness. And the other piece, I guess, the allure about the bucks is, and I had the opportunity to go visit Larry Benoit before he passed away, and I said to him, you know, I like you know, getting in and learning about a buck, and you know, walking behind him and chasing him on his own game. And he sharply corrected me and said, you know, that buck knows you're on him from the moment you slam the truck door. And he said, don't be fooled. So I think it's that, just, you know, being in their woods, and we don't get to see deer very much. And at least I don't. So one of the ways I can experience and learn about deer behavior is by being on their track, seeing what they've done, where they've been. I really like that, because the times I do see, you know, a mature buck, it's sometimes just a matter of seconds before I'm pulling the trigger. So I really like that element of tracking.
Yeah, and I think for me, the sense of adventure is the key. The story is all day long. It's not 5 minutes in a tree stand and he walks in and that's it. Even though in a tree stand the story is longer than that when you include the scouting and all the stuff that goes into it. But to have that unfold in the snow in front of you, it's just all day long. And really what appeals to me is I'm so in the moment all day when I'm on a track. There's nothing else going on in the world. You're living every step. You're thinking about what that buck's doing. The more bucks you track, you start to understand how they behave in general, and then the longer you spend on one buck, you start to understand how they behave specifically, because they are all individuals, and start to make guesses and predictions, and it becomes this big story that even if you're not successful, you get to talk about it, and you definitely learn a lot about the woods in those days on a track.
Awesome. Now, I kind of want to shift into the sort of the nuts and bolts of tracking, because I suspect that a lot of people who are here tonight, like, that's what they're here to kind of these little tips and tricks to kind of glean off of the conversation. But I want to acknowledge that there's probably people here too that have just never done this. They are interested in getting on a track and seeing where it leads. With those people in mind, what's the first sort of step into venturing into this world of tracking?
In my mind, it starts even before you start tracking deer. You know, a lot of learning happens when you track any animal through the woods. And so I've tracked rabbits for years in the winter, and they move in similar patterns and they do similar things. And so I think, you know, getting on snow, following an animal through its life habits and its patterns starts to introduce you to the tracking concept. And then I think there are a number of things that have to happen to track deer, getting into bigger country, being comfortable in the woods, getting in and out of the woods, having a vehicle that you can get to places, even though sometimes you can park on a paved road and go track a deer for a day. And then you can get into the details of buck tracks versus doe tracks. What's that deer doing, differentiating all those things. But I think the whole thing is really about woodsmanship and learning animal behavior and paying attention to details. I've noticed that with a buddy that I've had out tracking with me a little bit more this year, just the stuff he doesn't notice or isn't paying attention to, really, he's becoming more aware of things that are going on.
And getting to track with someone like whether it's a father or it could be your mother, a friend, an uncle, I think it's a really useful way because they can help key in on some of these nuances that we've all kind of had to learn the hard way. Like, for instance, when you're on a track and you're starting to come over a little rise, you might want to slow it down a little bit just in case he's over top of that rise embedded. And you'll see on the videos, I use the Grunt Call a lot. That's kind of as you're moving through the woods, it's really easy to be detected and seen. And so if I can keep a kind of a visual advantage and a movement advantage by getting up over a rise just a little bit and then making a call, maybe I can, spot that buck ahead of time. But I think, having somebody to go with, it's huge as far as learning experience goes.
Great. So what that kind of gets me thinking, there's a lot of people who are doing this, right? And just based on the audience we have tonight, the interest, just some of the conversations, people at parking lots, trailheads, things like that. However, there's definitely a level of success that you and some of your other sort of big woods bucks colleagues have had. What are the general qualities that makes someone a good tracker? I mean, and you mentioned a few things just that and then a comment, but the qualities that sets people apart.
I'm not the best tracker, and I'll lose the track routinely. I think that's you said, like, what is maybe an ideal track would be one that's all by himself, so you don't have to worry about sorting things out. But if you do have a lot of other tracks, possibly some other hunters in there, you're spending a lot of time kind of sorting things out. And I think from my perspective, the one thing I'm not going to do is give up on a track. And I tracked this really big buck in New Hampshire a few years back. I spent most of the day on a different buck, and it was like 2 hours later, I'd end up back at where I started. And then I'd go away from the track, cut another track, end up back where I left the other one. So I was essentially going back in time on this buck. So I got out of there, I just kind of made a beeline, and I got on this giant buck track, and it was probably like 15 minutes before quitting time. And I turned and I left his track, and I regretted it. I mean, so bad. I mean, maybe the 15 minutes wouldn't have made a difference, but this is one of those bucks that, as you're following his track, he was on another buck track that had come the other way. And the other buck would go through a set of trees, and this buck would go out around those trees. And he must have just been big, wide buck. And I said, never will I let myself pull back again. And so whether it's getting up and being in the woods, right at the crack of dawn, or being on the road before it's light, looking at tracks, I'm just going to give it every ounce of effort I have. And you don't need to do that. You can obviously go in and get, there's a lot of guys that'll, I think, drive the roads, and they'll drive them late into the morning, and a buck across the road at 8 in the morning, and somebody that's in early wouldn't have had an opportunity to see that, and they may be able to pick up an easy track. So I think a lot of the qualities I hear about, tenacity, dogged determination is a term that's used. It's not easy, but the rewards are there.
Matt, what do you think?
Yeah, I completely agree with Jeff. I think persistence is really the key. It overcomes almost any other failure you have. If you're not in shape, if you don't know what you're looking at, if you just persist with it, eventually it's going to come together for you. If you follow enough tracks on enough days and just keep showing up, one of those times the timing's going to be right. And that's all it is. It's timing. You know, a lot of it feels like luck in the end, even though it's putting yourself in the right position to be lucky. But yeah, persistence is the key.
Great. So, what's your starting point? Are you heading into areas that you've had history, that you've scouted? Are you, you mentioned, the option of driving roads to try to kind of cut a track that way. Are you looking for certain topographical features to start your search? Take us from kind of the start and sort of your mindset going into a location. Obviously, snow is a factor, but if all things are equal in terms of snow, where are you starting?
Yeah, if there's snow, I'm probably going to go somewhere where I'm somewhat familiar. I may have been in there on bare ground and done a little bit of scouting during the season. That's when I tend to do most of my scouting. I start with the logging practices of an area. You know, different aged cuts are better or worse feed for deer and hold a little more activity. So I start with the clear cutting that's going on around, or strip cuts, or different sorts of cuts, and then from there work on the topography. And so I tend to look uphill of the cuts to the saddles, to the shoulders and benches on the mountains to sort of plan a route to go look for a track. So I'll pick a spot on a map that I'm going to drive to based on that stuff. If I cut a track on the way in, I'm lucky and I'll just do that. But if not, I'll park the truck and start walking, and with the hopes of cutting something sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I mean, for me, if like this recent snowstorm we had for the opener muzzleloader in New Hampshire, what I'm doing is looking at the weather several days in advance. And even throughout the season, I'm constantly looking at the weather and trying to find out where the snow is going to be, and then how much snow we're going to get kind of over the course of a day or several days leading up to when I'm going to be hunting, which is usually Saturday and Sunday. And that gives me an idea of how to age a track, because once you get in, you got to be able to not only find that track, but realize, can you catch them or not? You know, is it fresh enough if it's not a smoking hot track? So I spend a lot of time watching the weather, and then now with, Onyx and so much digital content, I just will go any place I can get access to public land. I do believe that there's a big buck on every mountain, and just a matter of cutting his track once you get there. And I've been surprisingly lucky to I get to that spot, and my kind of strategy is if I see a buck track from the road, I'll take it and then just go on it. And if it's not the biggest buck track, that's okay, because eventually he'll lead me to something else. Versus, I've had seasons where I've passed over a lot of tracks looking for, a giant track, and you just spend all day looking. But I guess you can speed up your learning and the chance of actually seeing something if you're on a tracking versus if you're just looking for, this big 250-pound buck track.
Yeah. So if you would just describe that track that would pull you off that first track, just so people have an idea in their mind what's gonna pull you away from something.
I like seeing them where they're just dragging their toes, and it tells me a few things. It's a habit that I've only seen big mature bucks do, but it also tells me they're kind of lazy, lackadaisical in their stride, and so that hopefully I'll be able to catch up with them. I've tracked bucks like coming up into this November 10th through November 15th period, and they can be really hard to catch up with because they're out looking for a hot doe. You might walk 5 miles in one direction, they don't even stop to feed. So I guess a really big track, and then if he's, we call it skiing, if he's skiing through that snow, then it just gets me, I get in that zone right away. Just love it.
Matt, how about you?
Yeah, I always talk about cross country skiers and I love that big long steps when they're. I mean, sometimes when they're really stepping out, you know, they're cruising and you're going to have to pick up the pace. But just seeing that big long stride and a wide foot, like smashing things around, like they almost walk with a swagger. It's just exciting. You know, big beds, big scrapes, lots of activity like that really get me excited on a track.
Awesome. You know, I hear a lot. It sounds like there's a lot of these little details that have come from experience. And Jeff, what I like about your videos is it kind of it literally gives you the audience the opportunity to look over your shoulder. You know, I'm kind of curious about that setup and what you hope to be able to kind of convey to the viewer as you take us along on your tracks, on your hunts.
So I guess I made the decision at some point that my videos, they wouldn't be a how-to video. It's just me hunting, and I try to, you know, I guess keep the video record for myself as much as I do for anyone else. And folks seem to really like that content. Try to, you know, incorporate, there's a lot of unique sights you see out in the woods. So try to incorporate a variety of that. But the setup is, I just use a GoPro, and right now I'm using the GoPro 9. I've got 2 batteries, and that looks like it'll be able to last me all day long. And when I think I'm in close or I'm on something that's unique, I'll turn it on. It's attached to my pack. So I'll just reach up and hit the button. And I had to go through a little learning experience with it. I missed the opportunity to capture 2 bucks that I shot at. I didn't get either of these. Both of them were clean misses. But that was a little learning curve for me with the use of the GoPro. So I think I've got most of it down at this point. And that's, you know, I guess based on the feedback I received, people that maybe don't have that apprenticeship, they can learn something from it. And I like to be able to share.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, like I said, it's to have that vantage point of looking over your shoulder, and just the little bit of narration that you do, I think is definitely helpful. And it's just a unique perspective as opposed to the person following the hunter, and I think you kind of miss out on some of the details. So yeah, I think it's really pretty neat. Matt, a question for you. Can you talk a little bit about your preparation for this type of hunting? You know, you've covered some of this in some fitness articles and things like that you've done. But also, can you talk a little bit too, not just about the preparation, like physically, but also like the preparation that you put into like preparing, making the decisions as to what gear you're bringing out into the woods?
Sure. The gear piece is pretty much the same every day. It doesn't vary. If there's snow on the ground and I'm tracking, it's really pretty standard. Wool jacket, wool pants, rubber boots. I wear First Light underwear stuff and darn tough socks. So the gear piece is the same. I may wear heavier or lighter stuff based on the temperature, but that's about it. The physical preparation is important. I do a fair amount of running, hiking, trail running, that sort of stuff. A little bit of strength training. I almost don't think it matters too much what you do as long as you're getting out a few days a week with that intent. And I also think, like in the winter, I'm up at 4:30 to get a workout in before work. And I think the mental piece of that is really important. Like just being able to grind it out. Like I hunted today. I'm getting up. Dad and I are taking off at 4:45 tomorrow morning. Like it's just you keep showing up, and so the mental toughness comes through the training aspect. So doing hard stuff that feels uncomfortable is really important to get in shape for hunting, both physically and mentally.
Great. And for those of you who are watching again, if you have any questions, a bunch have come in. Feel free to enter those in the chat box, and we're going to get to those in a little bit. Now I have a question that I kind of hesitate to ask because, you know, you guys might have given us some just awesome pieces of wisdom, but someone who hears this and doesn't agree is going to dismiss everything. And that question is, what firearm are you bringing into the woods with you on your hunts during the regular firearm season? Either of you.
I hunt with a pretty standard Remington 760. It's actually the older model, and it's in a 30-06, so pump action rifle, 30-06. I use a scope. My eyes don't let me use a peep. I have shot one buck with a peep, and that was good enough for me.
So I might be kind of the black sheep of the Big Woods family in the sense that I hunt with a bolt action Model 7, and being from Central New York, you know, Remington plant was in Ilion, real close, and these FS Model 7s, they're 5.25 pounds. There's no super lightweight kind of bush gun, and I have a 1.5-5 Leopold scope on it, and even my muzzleloader, like, you know, I'll double and triple check, make sure that this is empty. But before and during the season, I do a lot of dry firing. I set up these, I just get pictures of bucks with their body, you know, in different positions, running whatever out of magazines. I set them up and I creep around my basement and I shoot. And it really, I think, has helped me in the course of being able to pull up and get that target acquisition really quickly, go through the mechanics of popping the scope covers and, you know, putting the safety off and getting a good clean shot. So I think that that's what I try to do to compensate for not having a pump where I can just, you know, light them up.
Matt, that was my next question. I was just curious as to what you guys do in terms of shooting practice, because like you said, the target acquisition is sometimes such a short amount of time, and you're almost, seems like half the time, surprised. So can you talk, Matt, do you do anything in particular to help prepare for that moment?
Yeah, I shoot quite a bit as the season's coming on. So just at the range, that's pretty standard. I do some skeet shooting, which I'm horrible at, but I feel like just mounting the shotgun and swinging through and being able to pull the trigger and acquire the target. I do some dry fire stuff, like Jeff said. And then in the woods, I actually pull up on every partridge that takes off because they scare the heck out of me. And I just try to get it in the scope. You know, not with the safety off, none of those things, you know, a safe, but just being able to pull up on that scary, noise-driven target.
That's great. That's great. Bringing us back to BHA a little bit, can you guys talk a little bit about the importance of public land to your style of hunting and just some takeaways you've had from that over the years?
Yeah, I would say, you know, my father was part of the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, and so I grew up, you know, understanding the resources. And the Adirondack State Park is a wonderful place to hunt and access, you know, the woods. But being a transplant out to New England, I had to start from ground one. I had no, you know, traditional hunting areas that had passed down to me, and so when I went into New Hampshire, I realized that, you know, there was a lot of access to both private and public land. I just was so thrilled. And now that I live in Massachusetts, I've got to be a little more careful on the areas you can hunt versus you can't hunt that, you know, maybe public land access as well. But it's, you know, it's absolutely key to the way we hunt and being able to get out and, you know, eventually get onto a track and do what we do. It's fundamental to it. So, you know, I can't speak you know, anymore to the importance of it, really. Highest priority.
Yeah, I think we have something really, really special in New England with especially in the timber company lands with conservation easements. So public access to what is essentially privately owned land. without really restrictions. You have to behave yourself, but you can park and go. And I think a lot of people have taken that for granted for a long time. I grew up in our hunting camp. We could just go wherever we wanted, and there was never a posted sign, and it never mattered. And that's slowly changed over the years. And so being able to get into these stretches of country where you can follow a buck for miles and not worry about who owns what is just essential. And so the combination of whether it's federally managed land, national wildlife refuges, national forests, or these privately owned but publicly accessible areas through conservation easements or just tradition are a real benefit to all of us.
Great. Thank you. Now I want to get into some of the question Q&A section. We've got a bunch of great questions that have come in. There's one question from Caroline that was asking, she asked about what, obviously we're looking at that certain tracks, but what else are you specifically kind of looking for? And I'll add another little question into that, particularly as you feel, like what signs you're looking for that sort of lead you to believe that you are closing that distance and maybe coming up on a buck.
Oh, the mistakes we've both made, I'm sure. so many mistakes. I mean, there's the obvious one that a lot of people talk about, which is feeding. They're feeding, they're going to get ready to bed. I have trouble shooting them out of their bed. It's just, they seem to catch me. Maybe I'm moving too fast. There's other people that could sneak up, 10 yards from them in their bed. So maybe I miss some of those signs. But when I'm on the track, I'd say one of the most exciting things that I see is antler marks in the snow. I just love seeing that when they feed. And if they're feeding on a tree, maybe you can see some of those tine marks in the snow on a log. You get an idea of their rack size, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, I think there's a number of things I look for that kind of clue me in on the idea that the buck, really what you're looking for is a change in the behavior. He's been doing one thing in front of you for most of a day, and all of a sudden he switches direction or heads uphill in combination with that feeding stuff can be really indicative that he's about to lay down. Heading uphill is always nice rather than downhill. They tend to bed up high. None of these things are 100%, but you do see that. And then if a buck is making rubs and scrapes in front of you all day, he's distracted. And so every time he stops to do that, as long as you're not messing around and taking a bunch of pictures of those rubs, you're gaining time on him. So I like to see that stuff because you're catching up.
That's a good point. Cool. Another question from Kevin. Kevin says that this Saturday, just across the Canadian border on the Minnesota side, they've just lost all of their snow. And they're expecting highs in the 50s just as the chasing phase begins to ramp up. All we have right here is an outcrop or a swamp with no open soil. How would you tackle that situation? And then also a side note, thank you very much for their videos. He pegged his personal second best tracking by your methods, dressing out at 227 pounds. Dandy buck for sure. So what are your, what's your approach when this snow, like we're looking at, all across New England, I saw into next Thursday, temperatures in the 60s. So what's the approach?
For me, I spend that time learning new areas. I don't try to track necessarily. I'll go somewhere. Oftentimes it's adjacent to places I've been, things I've seen in the distance that I've like, oh, I should check that out. Bare ground days, I'll spend still hunting those areas, learning the terrain, looking for rubs, signpost rubs, scrape lines, that sort of thing. I might sit for 15 or 20 minutes on a spot. I don't have that in me. I don't have that patience. And so it stinks if you have a 1 week or 2 week season. I think Minnesota's is 2 weeks. You may not get snow at all. And so that makes it really tough. But for me, I I have decent chances over the course of 6 weeks, so I can take those bare ground days and learn something that may come in 3 years from now, but I've learned it. So that's my strategy on that.
It's a good point, Matt, and congratulations, Kevin. That's one heck of a buck at 227. I think not having snow any place in the state, it frees you to go look someplace new, right? Your odds are kind of the same regardless of where you might go. If it was, November 10th, I'd probably try to get into some kind of pinch point. Just when you're tracking, you kind of learn deer behavior, and a lot of times I'll mark on the GPS places that look really good, particularly where there's scrape lines. And those are areas that, like, if we didn't get snow this past weekend, I was headed north to essentially sit some scrape lines. And when I say sit, kind of like Matt, I can't sit for, I don't know, I did a rattling session the other day, and I looked at my watch and it was 7 minutes later, and I was itching to go. And, the golden rule is they should really wait for about 20 minutes. And I gave it 10 and then I headed out. I just, I like moving, but if you can commit to rattling at this time and sitting for 20 minutes, then you're going to give something long enough to kind of sneak in. And I've had, quite a few bucks come into rattling. A lot of that's been further up north in Ontario, but it's an effective strategy.
Great. A question from Dave. He said, Matt and Jeff, thanks for doing this. Question about your speed and putting that into some context that for those of us who are not experienced trackers, how fast are you actually traveling at the different phases of the track that you're on? And what are you looking for that might make you move faster or slower, relative to, say, a normal person's gait?
I'm cruising pretty good. Although when I first get onto a track, the first 100 yards, I'll take it slow. I just want to know what he's doing. Sometimes I'll go backwards on the track just to see what he's been doing before I try to go forward. But I think for me, if you don't catch up to him during the day, then you've never given yourself an opportunity. So I'd rather go a little bit too fast and bump him. Not try to, some people will intentionally try to bump him, but a lot of times those bucks will take off and they might not slow down for 30, 45 minutes, and they can cover a lot of ground in that time. So I try to go fast and then look for when, like Matt maybe said, they make a left or a right, they start to feed, and then you just put the brakes on and you're taking a step maybe every 2-3 seconds. For me, that's about as slow as I'll go. And just try not to be constantly moving. It's better to take a step and stop and look, take another step, versus it's just a slow, constant movement.
Yeah, I think more people would be better off going too fast than too slow. At least then you're in the game. I spent a lot of time seeing a lot of white flags fly off through the woods, and then I finally started to learn to slow down at the end. And the feeding sign, the change in behavior, the hooks uphill, those sort of things will really clue you into slowing down. And at that point, it's almost painfully slow. The bucks I've shot in their beds, you get close by being really slow and really minimizing movement through your whole body. You're just moving your eyes. You're not moving your hands until you have to pull your rifle up. And so I think a lot of people spend too much time in some middle speed and never quite get there, but aren't moving slow enough to be undetected either. And I think between 1 mile an hour and 2 miles an hour is what I average through the woods. I think 2 miles an hour is pretty quick. You're not hiking on a trail, you're not walking down a road. So that's the speed, and that includes some stopping time. So somewhere in there is probably my pace.
On those pauses, do you take any consideration as to when or where you stop? Obviously you need to read the track and stuff, but are you pausing against a tree when you look up? Do you take any consideration to that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I pause, like if you're exiting thicker woods to something more open, I pause where I can see before I expose myself, so that, you know, maybe if he's out there, I can see it. I can't remember if it was when we were recording or live or beforehand, but Jeff mentioned pausing before you or as you crest a hill. That sort of thing is pretty important. So terrain changes or cover changes are good places to pause.
Yeah, and even when you're tracking, a lot of times I can look and I can see the direction of the track, and I'll try to make a guess. You know, is the buck headed up on this ridge, and is he going to bed? And if so, where is he going to bed? So I might slow down 100 yards before that and then creep my way up through. And I think in part developing that confidence after you've bumped enough bucks, you get a confidence of where they're going to be, and then you know you can go slow for an hour, and it's well spent time because he very well could be there. But if you get up there and he's just gone over the other side, then you pick up the pace again and you try to make up that time. But it's not only, I guess, what the deer's doing, but where is he headed as well. A lot of times I like to get up on the ridge and bed. And at that point, I'm also thinking about the wind. If, you know, they will a lot of times bed where they have the wind at their advantage. I don't like getting off the track much, but if the wind is wrong, then I'll make a circle on them. I'll try to come in and cut above them or cut downwind of them.
Good point. Yeah, I meant to circle back on that, on the question of wind, so thank you for covering that. Eric asked about, he'd like to hear more about the use of the grunt call, and when you're using it and where you're using it.
Do you use one, Matt?
I do. Usually only after I jump something. I almost never do it ahead of time. It's like a last-ditch attempt to get something to stop. I blow at them with my mouth, and then I get the grunt call out from in my shirt. So it's never a pretty scene.
I use it quite a bit. If anybody watches the videos, you know, if I put every time I grunted and didn't, you know, hear anything, there'll be a lot of grunting in the videos. I don't do it nonstop, but I'll do it. I'll wait maybe, you know, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, and then go on. But a lot of it is where I get to some advantage point where maybe there's an opening, right? You can envision, maybe you could see 70 yards in the woods, but you can't see beyond that. So it's a good opportunity to grunt. And maybe you can call something out of that, the area you can't see that you're going to go step into and expose yourself.
Great, thank you. A question from Rich. Was interested in your layering system. Matt, you mentioned how you're wearing a lot of wool. Also, what you guys are wearing in your feet. Basically, if you're giving any consideration to scent control, or how your system would change from tracking to, say, a tree stand situation, or how it would be different.
I wear wool if it's going to be a really wet day, you know, wool long johns, but I wear the Sitka gear, and I go really light. Actually, the clothing I'm wearing is not something that if I stand still for a few minutes, I'm going to be warm. I'm usually getting cold by that point. So I try to go really light to avoid sweating, and which eventually makes you cold. But I know that there's a lot of folks that like wool, and I grew up hunting in polar fleece as well, which is, you know, ultra quiet. But a lot of the times, the vast majority of the time when you're tracking, you're not in that really heavy snow. You're in a little more open snow. And I've just found that system seems to work well for me. And if I get hot, you know, open up the pit vents and unzip the jacket, take a few layers off. So it's nice to be able to do that.
Anything you want to add, Matt, on that?
I guess just to address the scent control piece, I don't do anything special for that. My clothes are hanging inside to dry tonight, and I'll just put them on tomorrow. So I don't do anything special there. And I think there was a footwear question in that, you know, rubber boots, I use Superfeet insoles in there. They have a wool covering, which I think keeps the bottom of my feet a little warmer if I do happen to stand for a little while, or if it's a really cold day. And my boots are uninsulated all season. Yeah, I've hunted 10 below, 20 below in those. You're moving, you wouldn't want to stand still very long, but yeah, light and fast.
Great. Cody asks if you ever used a shotgun at all for tracking, and have you ever in these situations shot a deer at ranges where you just absolutely need a rifle?
I think my longest tracking shot was one of my first bucks I shot tracking, and that was about 100 yards, which, you know, modern day shotgun, you could certainly pull that off, and pull that off with the muzzleloader as well. So I don't think you necessarily need a rifle for distance.
Yeah, I'd agree. My longest shot was last year in Maine, about 90 yards. I think that was the longest tracking shot I've had, and I think you could do it with a shotgun. I can't think of why you wouldn't.
Brian asks, do you guys drag the deer out, quarter it, bone it out, pack it out that way?
Drag. Gotta be able to get it to the weigh station and see what he weighs.
I've boned them out before, carried them out backpack style. That's in the Adirondacks. These aren't 200-pound bucks by any means. These are bucks that are, you know, 140, 150, 160, which is still an awful lot of weight to carry. And I got second thoughts about doing it again, actually. So it just depends if you're on dry ground. If you're on dry ground, it's tough. You got to think about something else other than dragging, if you can. I think depending on the state you're in, the laws may or may not allow, you know, quartering them up or just boning them out.
Yeah. A question from Kevin. How do you determine if a track is too old to take?
I mean, I'll take a track that's a day or two old if that's all I have, because it undoubtedly is going to lead to something else. And a lot of times the buck, you know, what I'm always hoping is he may have made that track, then gone off and done something and come back to that area, and I'll cut a fresher version of his track. So that's why I'm always watching the weather to see like little snow squalls, so you can properly age a track. And a lot of times a track will look a lot older than it actually is. That's my experience. They tend to look older than they are versus look fresher than they are.
Matt, how about you?
Yeah, I've never, if the track's big enough, I wouldn't pass it up. You know, if you can always hope to catch up, or as Jeff said earlier, deer are going to lead you to other deer, and so you may cross something going in, even if it's the same buck. So if it's a good track that I would follow normally, and like if there were choices, I would take the fresher one. But no, if there's snow on the ground and it's probably not going to be more than 2 days old anyway, I'm probably just going to take it.
It might sound crazy. A couple years ago, I was up in northern New Hampshire, and I cut this big track, and it was a day old, and I tracked it for, I don't know, 30 minutes, and I got on another guy's boot track was on this, and he had tracked it the day before, and I said, this buck is so big, like, I'm not going to leave it because this guy might not know what he's doing, and he might also bail. Maybe it was 4 o'clock in the afternoon when he cut this buck track. So I tracked him and this buck for probably 2 hours, and I said, okay, I've invested enough time here. I'm going to peel off. But you never know. I've also come across where one buck I shot, I saw fresh boot tracks and my heart sank. I thought, oh, this guy's picked up the track ahead of me, and he was walking the wrong way on it. And he then peeled off. I was like, that's great. So you never know. Even if you encounter people, it doesn't mean jump off that track right away. Not everybody's tracking.
Got it. John asks, do either of you guys carry low power binoculars and use them as part of like scanning the woods when you pause?
No, I don't.
Me either. I missed a buck because I was using binoculars instead of my scope once. He was feeding out in front of me, and I thought I'd take a peek at him through the binoculars first, and he caught me moving. And so the binoculars went away at that point.
The question of, or the comment that Jeff, or you're making about coming on someone else's boot tracks, and I'm just going to just throw myself here under the bus. I've been on a track and following it, and all of a sudden I come across boot tracks. I'm like, what a-hole is out here? Only to realize it's my own boot tracks. What do you ever have any situations where deer are doing like circling back on themselves? And if so, what's that telling you?
So it was the last day of the New Hampshire season. I got into this track and I tracked this buck all day long. I jumped him multiple times, and I had walked up this logging road and cut his track going across it this way. And wouldn't you know it, like 3 p.m., I was standing back in my boot track after tracking him all day long. He had just made a giant circle. And so that was, I couldn't believe it. And then I stuck with him. I chased him another, I don't know, it was another maybe 2 miles until it was dark. I wanted to give it everything I had. But yeah, they'll definitely loop back around. I've seen that.
Yeah, I tracked a buck in Maine. Dad and I were on him, and we tracked him through this spot, and he made a fairly tight loop and made a scrape in there and then walked across our tracks. So at that point, we hadn't jumped him. So all of a sudden, like, this is way fresher than we thought it was. So if you're making small circles and catching up the bucks in your own tracks, you're close.
Good.
A piece I wanted to add, Chris, is, I don't have a lot of time to scout, and I've got little kids and a full-time job and everything. And one of the things I really like about tracking is you don't need to invest a lot of time up front. It's an opportunity where you go in and, the clock starts in the morning and you finish in the afternoon. And that's kind of your season in that day almost with tracking. So that's what's really attractive about it for somebody that might not have a lot of time to put in a lot of effort ahead of time.
Great. Thank you. Catherine asked, generally, do you have any advice for someone who wants to get into hunting but doesn't have anyone to teach them? Any good resources? We'll say good resources specific to tracking that you guys would suggest. And I will plug on behalf of BHA, our mentorship program here in New England. And if you visit our website, backcountryhunters.org, navigate to the New England section, you can get information on our mentorship program there. But specific to tracking, where can people go to get some additional information, insights, and that sort of stuff, resources?
I think there's a ton of information out there nowadays. YouTube videos, Jeff's Big Woods Buck stuff is out there. Ronnie Elmer's stuff is really good. The podcasts that people are doing are good. Hal Blood runs a deer clinic in the spring, which if you're a tracker would be like a college degree probably. So there's a lot of good stuff out there. And then more generally for the hunting stuff, in addition to the BHA mentorship stuff, a lot of fish and wildlife departments have different programs that are available, learn to hunt type stuff. The R3 initiatives are really up and coming, and so I think we're going to see more and more of that stuff in the coming years.
Jeff's videos, of course, but Jeff, any other suggestions?
I think some of the books are great, specific to tracking, and like I haven't limited my reading to just tracking books. Looking at styles in which people, hunt deer in the Midwest, as well as, some other things like, backcountry bow hunting, things that I don't necessarily even do, but just looking at resources for learning different techniques that people have employed. Elk hunting was a really unique experience for me. It taught me to hunt on the ground with a bow and arrow. And it gave me some different ideas on how close you could get to big animal like that. But from a hunting perspective, I think, a great place that I've found as well is if you join a fish and game club, a shooting range. There's undoubtedly people who have hunted that may be willing to share their experience as well. And I think it's a great way to build a network if you're kind of outside the loop initially, and also get some experience with firearms around safety.
Yeah, very good point. We're coming up on time here, and I want to be respectful of your time and everybody who's joining us. But sort of in closing, any sort of parting words of wisdom, tips, or things that you wanted to kind of throw into the conversation that we didn't get to, and then also lastly, how can people sort of connect with you guys, follow, find out what you're up to, or things along those lines?
I guess I'll do a quick plug for Tracking 200. It's a YouTube series, and it's my journey on trying to harvest a 200-pound buck in New Hampshire specifically. It's been a challenge for me. I've had some missed opportunities, but I wanted to tell the story. I had been just posting videos of successful hunts, and there's a whole lot more that goes on behind it. So I wanted to share that. I think, it's been a great opportunity to talk to folks. Find me on Facebook or Facebook Messenger, YouTube, and I think there's a lot of trackers out there that are happy to share, their knowledge. So just happy to be another one that's willing to share.
I think on the final message standpoint, if you think you want to track, you just have to get out and get started. Start close to home, start in small woods, but get started. You can read as many books as you want, watch as many videos as you want, and there's nothing like real life experience to really teach you. And you learn something every day. You're in the woods chasing a deer around, so don't think it's wasted if you don't come home with meat. As far as following me, I'm on Facebook. Big Woods Bucks is always a good place to get a lot of deer tracking content stuff that Jeff and I and all the team members, Hal Blood, are on there and sharing stuff. So that's probably the primary place these days.
Guys, I want to thank you so much. I'm as I prepare to return north, I'm kind of bummed that there's probably not going to be any snow, but I know that's not going to stop this crew from getting out in the woods. Again, thank you so much for your time, and thank you everybody for joining us this evening. And again, if you're not a Backcountry Hunters and Anglers member, we'd love to have you as part of our membership and get you engaged at whatever level you'd like to, whether you want to take part in any of our boots on the ground projects, or at the advocacy side, or even the mentorship, whether as a mentor or a mentee. And I guess the best connection point for there is backcountryhunters.org. We also have a YouTube channel where all of these previous events that we've had and conversations with people can be found. Instagram, our Facebook group is pretty active. It's a really friendly conversation over there. So lots of ways for you to plug in. Thank you so much. Have a great season. Be safe out there. And we look forward to seeing you at the next virtual event. And have a great night, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Take care.